there's a space between when something happens and how you react to it. And that space is the pause. And if you could just tell yourself and be mindful to pause, look the other way, take a breath, and then you might be able to, in most cases, stop yourself from regretting what you did.
Yeah. I've had times where I've even had to walk away. And now, you can't do that obviously with like a toddler, but with older kids, there's been times where I knew that if I stayed there like face to face, I was going to lose it. And so I've had to say, I need to take a minute.
Welcome to A Holistic Dose. We've been through the plot twist, divorce, parenting, burnout, reinvention, and now we're doing midlife with more honesty and way less BS. Think of us as your unfiltered friends, here to remind you that you're not too late or too old or too far behind. I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Jeanette.
And today we're going to be diving into a topic of parenting with our guest, Stacey Silberman. She's a parenting coach and an author of a new book, Stop Screaming at Your Kids. So we're so excited to have you here, Stacey. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I was really intrigued to hear about your new book that, you just launched, because I grew up in a household where I had a lot of screaming, specifically from my mom, and it was really stressful. So I was really interested to hear about your story and, what drove you to write this book. So if you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I was talking to somebody about what I wanted to have in the book, and I had mentioned that my father screamed at us incessantly, and he was like a monster.
Really?
He was scary. Yeah, because he was a mean person. And then that person I was talking to said, "Oh my gosh, that's what you should call it. Stop screaming at your kids." And that's how that came about. Originally, I wanted to write a book about my son who passed away 8 years ago. But the fact of the matter is that those kind of stories are great to tell, but it may not actually help people. And so it went from all the way over there to all the way over here. While I was studying to give a TEDx talk, and you have to kind of grind down your message into one small place. And so it went from death and anxiety and addiction to parenting, because parenting comes before all of those things happen. And every addict that I've met when I was working in a recovery center basically had a story about a bad family upbringing.
Was your son's death related to addiction?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he had ADHD, and that was, he would be 33 now. Yeah, he would be 33 now. So back then they didn't really know what it was, and they just thought it was hyperactive boys. And so and then they had a weird way of diagnosing it. So he never got diagnosed properly until he was about 15. And in the meantime, he developed anxiety disorder, panic disorder, depression. And kids with ADHD tend to be very hard on themselves because they get about 200% more criticism than the average child in their school lifetime.
Wow. That's incredible.
So, and then I didn't help
myself.
Yeah. So it didn't help that I didn't know either. I didn't know I had it. I didn't know my daughter had it, and she had a different type. So we're more like the hyper-focused type, maybe a combined type of ADHD, where it's more about, once I get on a subject, I get really invested.
So Stacey, you work as a parenting coach as well, correct?
Yes.
So how long have you been doing the parent coaching?
I've been doing the parenting coaching for about 10 years.
Okay.
It mostly started after my son died. And people started calling me all the time when they were having problems with specific problems, maybe more addiction related or mental health related. But what I'm doing now is a little bit more just fresh, without having those particular problems in place.
Yeah. And I know you've been very vocal about your loss with Max. So tell us what you'd like our listeners to know about your son, Max, and how he has shaped your work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Max came out very spirited. He always had such a beautiful, bright smile and a lot of personality, and people would stop me and comment on how beautiful he was and how much light he basically emanated from his body. And he was always the baby that did things that no other babies did. So we'd go to like a mommy and me class, and he'd be the only baby that crawled out of my lap, early crawler, and went to the head of the class because he wanted to be the center of attention. He was a character.
And so how has Max shaped your work?
Well, I made a lot of mistakes when I raised Max. I didn't have a really good place to go for information. And even though we did seek out experts, and he started therapy when he was 4 years old because he started lying at a very early age, and we didn't understand why. And so, but, at that point, they didn't talk about boundaries. They didn't talk about the nervous system. They didn't talk about co-regulation.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know a lot of stuff. And so I myself, also coming from an upbringing that didn't have a lot of good modeling, I didn't learn, and I had nowhere to learn from in the moment either. So I always wished, I was like, why is there no manual for this?
Right.
For parenting? Yeah. Where is the manual? And the old man, there were some other parenting experts that came from, for example, going back to the turn of the century, when America became an industrial nation and women were starting to work in the factories, and they actually hired lobbying parent advisors to basically condition mothers to believe that they shouldn't give a lot of affection to their children.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
And that, they were basically telling them, don't even kiss them that much, and maybe give them a kiss on the head when they go to sleep, because they didn't want them to be that connected. They just wanted them to be controlled. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because that made them better workers. So in other words, they worked them really long hours, and they were not home for their children. And it was all just work and control and discipline. There wasn't a whole lot of connection. Mm-hmm. And, people really struggled in that day. And that's what came down in the generations up to when I was a parent. Maybe it got a little bit better, but it was still all about control and discipline. Yeah. And do as I say, not as I do.
Yes, and don't talk back.
Yeah, so when I was a kid, and so I was born in 1979, and especially in Christian households, Dr. James Dobson was like the
Dobson,
go-to.
That's who I saw, yeah.
I remember my parents had the book, The Strong-Willed Child, and it was very into spanking and control, and, you tell your kids what they need to be doing, and so that's how I grew up for sure. And it's interesting that just newer research is showing it's about connection, not that control and being a dictatorship.
Yeah, I bought that same book because I had no idea. Mm-hmm. And I had my son in a Jewish preschool, and they told me, no, don't spank him. But the book said to spank him. And meanwhile, they were on me about my son being very touchy-feely. He was at 18 months, they said, Mrs. Silberman, you need to shadow your child, in Mommy and Me. I was already in trouble with him in Mommy and Me. Wow. And so he wanted to touch and pinch. It's sensory stuff. Mm-hmm. Yes. And he was just very physical. And I didn't know what to do with that. I mean, I was following him around, and I would move him, but he was so curious, which is what a little toddler would be. Mm-hmm. And they wanted me to stop him, but don't spank him.
And it's so hard when you're getting all this conflicting parenting advice from people who call themselves experts. And it's like, Dr. James Dobson, right? But, he says something different. So it's tough as a parent, very hard.
And before Dobson, there was Watson and Holt, who were the ones at the turn of the century. So this Watson guy had 4 children. And apparently 3 of them tried to commit suicide. One of them
Oh,
succeeded.
wow.
Wow.
And he was a sick man telling parents how to raise their children.
Wow. Incredible.
And that was like, I think they were basically hired as a propaganda branch for the industrialists because
Wow.
they just didn't care about the workers' families. They just wanted them to work.
So when did you start really delving into this and learning about the history of parenting and the messages we've been given?
Well, I ran into somebody on Instagram who was talking about the history. So I learned it from her, and I forget her name, but she just kept putting up these interesting stories about why parenting became what it was and how it had kind of filtered through the generations to become what it was today. And I know that people were wondering, why is there so much mental health disorder and so much substance use? And it's because kids just weren't raised with connection. They were constantly being told they weren't good enough. They were constantly being criticized, and they internalized that. I know I did myself. And then the yelling from my father, I learned to do that, and I did it to my kids. And I didn't see it at first. It took a long time. I had already done my damage by the time I really, really realized it. I might have seen a little bit of it, but all of this takes reparenting and reconditioning to change. And that could take like 7 years.
So why do so many of us default to yelling, even when we know it's not healthy?
Out of frustration, out of so it's more about reaction as opposed to responding. So I became hypervigilant because when you do scream at a kid all the time, they basically are in fight or flight all the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're walking on eggshells, living in fear. And so I became very hypervigilant. And so, of course, my nervous system, being that I have ADHD too, is very sensitive to loud noises. And I just didn't have good control over myself, to be honest. And I was just very reactive, which is bad. That's what I learned. That's what I did. And that's not the way to be. I mean, all of us want to be better friends too. You know, it goes to friendship, it goes to relationships, it goes to parenting. These are things that are all the way through our lives that will benefit us. And, you know, I made a lot of mistakes. I still make mistakes, but I've learned so much more now. So now the idea is to take a pause. As Viktor Frankl says, there's a space between when something happens and how you react to it. And that space is the pause. And if you could just tell yourself and be mindful to pause, look the other way, take a breath, and then you might be able to, in most cases, stop yourself from regretting what you did.
Yeah. I've had times where I've even had to walk away. And now, you know, you can't do that obviously with like a toddler, but with older kids, there's been times where I knew that if I stayed there like face to face, I was going to lose it. And so I've had to say, I need to take a minute.
And that's okay. But I think as
Yeah.
moms, we're not conditioned to know that like we need to take times for ourselves too.
Yeah. And also the other thing that goes with that is that I became the repair queen. So I was always making so many mistakes. The thing about me is when I make a mistake, I'll ruminate on it. So if I don't apologize or repair it, it will bother me until I do. So I am good at repairing. That's probably my saving grace. Now, there comes a point where repair isn't good enough, depending on what you do, how often you do it. Somebody might get really sick of you. Your kids might just be disgusted with you at some point. I mean, the general you. But I always repair, and repair is critical because no parent is perfect, and all parents are going to make these mistakes. They might scream again, but if they tell their child, you know what, that was my fault. I didn't control my behavior. I love you. This is not your fault. You know, you didn't make me scream. I screamed because I did the wrong thing.
So, Stacey, you mentioned that you figured out you were ADHD late diagnosed, much like myself. It was like around 36 years old. And ironically, how I found out was A guy that I was dating for 2.5 years, too long after my divorce, was an addict. He was an oxy addict, turns out to be. But he was the one who, because he already did his try with the Adderall and everything, which, he did have ADHD, but he was the one who mentioned to me, he's like, you might have it. And then found me a doctor that would be able to prescribe it. And it turns out that I was. But I remember, talking to my mom about it, who is a nurse or was a nurse her whole career. And I said, I'm taking this, and it's helping me a great bit. And she was not wanting to hear it. She was like, there's absolutely no way you have ADHD. I would know. And there was almost a shame from her around it. And then I started to explain to her and do my own education that it presents differently in females. To your point about your son, Max, being hyperactive and you can see it. And a female, it's more in our minds that we're overthinking and overdoing. So I'm curious about you and like when you learned that you were yourself ADHD, and did that help connect the dots for learning about your son too?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that probably throughout my life, I thought there's something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
And
I thought like I was stupid.
I didn't know what it was. No, I was good in school, but I was always in trouble. And I couldn't sit still. Like even when I went to back to school night, I thought, how in the hell do these kids sit here all day? I can't even sit here for an hour.
Right.
It was like driving me crazy. So I knew something was going on, and I didn't really, when I say really realize it, until I was almost 60 years old.
Wow.
And I was working in a recovery center as a chef and a mother figure. And I had this epiphany. First of all the addicts seem to have some form of ADHD and other things that went with it, like OCD.
Mm-hmm.
My sister was ADHD dyslexic. She had a really bad case of ADHD rage. And I don't know if she ever really realized that it was that.
What is that? I've never heard of that.
Well, rage goes heavily with ADHD because it happens to be a part of our executive function and our ability to co-regulate our emotions. And people with ADHD have a very hard time with, there's different levels of ADHD. So some people are much worse affected than others. So luckily, my executive function is pretty good. And I've been able to kind of overcome a lot of things that I suffered throughout my, like time blindness, now always being late and, maybe misjudging things or just going off the handle, being kind of a little bit like instantly angry, kind of with the yelling thing. And people with ADHD are way more likely to be yellers and screamers.
Yeah.
And like, for example, your mother might really be upset about hearing it because there's some grain of truth that might be there for her as well. Because it's extremely, it's extremely genetic. And then like Dr. Gabor Mate thinks it's an attachment issue, whether kids have good attachment with their parents, a secure attachment. And that could be true. That could be part of it. Because usually there isn't a secure attachment, because when parents yell and scream and belittle their children and make them afraid, they don't have a secure attachment because it means they're afraid of you, which means they're insecure. Right. And then there's trauma, that could also mimic ADHD as well or cause it. If you believe in, do you guys know what epigenetics are? Epigenetics are kind of like when something happens in the family and it gets ingrained in your DNA.
No, that's
like really deep trauma.
What is it called? ACE scores. Are you familiar with ACE scores? There's something called ACE scores, which sounds like the same exact thing.
It could be the same thing where things are passed. They kind of like embed themselves in your DNA and then it gets genetically passed on.
Genetically.
Like, can you give us an example of a scenario that would?
So when I first heard about epigenetics, it was many years ago, maybe like 15 years ago. I was in a book club and we read a book that was written by somebody who was in the Holocaust and survived.
Oh.
And they first started realizing it because Holocaust survivors realized that their children were kind of traumatized by their trauma so that it somehow got environmentally passed down.
Yeah.
as well as genetically passed down.
Wow.
And that's when they created the study of epigenetics. So it's basically that now they believe that genetics are changeable. They could be like triggered sometimes. Like sometimes you have things in your DNA, and if there's something in your life that triggers it, it's more likely to happen. So, I'm not an expert in these studies. I just know enough about it to know that they're still trying to figure out which came first, the chicken or the egg with ADHD. Is it truly genetic because it appears to be genetic?
Right.
Or is it epigenetic? Is it something that's because for example, my mother had a lot of trauma in her childhood. I mean serious trauma.
Yeah.
And they didn't have therapists back then. They didn't treat those kids back then. And they just become very dissociated and live with it and pass it along until one day someone like me, the middle child, figures it out and does the work. Too. Yeah, and I'm the black sheep of the family. I'm the troublemaker. So
Well, if it was epigenetic, then would it mean that the other siblings would have it? Because I'm a middle child with two other sisters, and neither of them have ADHD. And I for sure felt so different from them. And then once I explained all the side effects and all the symptoms to my mom, she's like, oh, I have it. And that was in her late 60s that she now is embracing it and understanding it. But my other sisters, they just do not understand at all. And I'm like, you guys, they don't understand when I've said to them before, and I got in a big fight with my older sister about this, where she's like, oh, mentioned about calling or checking in on something in her daughter's life. And time passed by, and, a day it goes by so fast, but or weeks rather, that it's like a blink of an eye, and then I miss things. And then she was so mad. I'm like, you literally have no idea the ADHD, the time blindness. And she's like, stop blaming it on that. It's not that. And I'm like, it's you until you experience it, you have no idea.
They really don't get it. We're and I know that in my childhood, and even in my son's childhood, we never really fit into our peer group. We might have fit in with younger people and older people, but we had a harder time relating to our peers. There's the time blindness. There's the out of sight, out of mind. So if somebody's not in front of you, you
forget
can
about them.
Forget they exist. And at the same time, when you see them again, it's like you never were away from them. You can rekindle whatever you had with that person.
And I also don't remember certain, if there was a fight or something, I can't even remember the details, but everybody will remind me of the things. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah, my memory in my childhood is very foggy, but I remember some specific traumatic events.
Same.
But yeah, I've blocked out a lot of things. So there's some dissociation is just another part of dealing with trauma, that we maybe want to forget those things, but they're still in our subconscious, and it's still in our body. And that's where the somatic work comes in. So for example, going back to that, when I was raising my kids and when I was going to therapy, they only had talk therapy, and they never talked about boundaries, nervous system issues, co-regulation, all the things that we know about now. And they don't talk about somatics. So they didn't understand that the body keeps the score, like the title of that book. It really does. And we hold things in our body until we're able to kind of purge them out of our bodies. We still hold on to all these old memories and traumas. Even if they're not intellectually in our mind, they're in our bodies. And I learned that much later. By being in the recovery business, I learned a ton of stuff about trauma, overcoming trauma, therapy. I had hundreds of kinds of different facilitators to learn from. That's where I learned a lot of this stuff. I literally went to group therapy with these facilitators for over 2 years straight, sometimes 3 to 5 days a week.
When did you decide to go into that line of work? Was this prior to Max passing, or was it something just always within you?
No, it was never even a remote idea in my mind to go into that kind of work. I was a realtor.
Okay.
And I was it was during COVID, when I was home after 9 or 10 months, and I got really bored. And my husband had gotten a job as the CFO in a recovery center, and they needed someone to help with the cooking. And I'm a good cook. So, I could do that. And they said, we want you to also kind of play like a mother figure too. I mean, I didn't know why, but I was like, oh yeah, I love that, because I love being a mom. I may not be the best mom, but I love doing it.
Right.
So I took on that role. It was much smaller at the time, and then they grew, and I grew in my position. But I'm just a super observant person. I'm kind of meticulous, and that's the kind of ADHD that I have, that hyper focusing, really seeing that. I'm a pattern reader and a detail seer. Like, I see all the details, and there might even be a little touch of autism in me, like in like sensory stuff, loud noises, and maybe the feel of certain fabrics. But it could be that simple. It's just a few little minor things. So that would be called AUDHD, like ADHD. I was not professionally assessed. I assessed myself, and I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, I know what I am. And I don't, because I never went on medication because it was too late. I mean, I'm not going to go on medication in my 50s. Wasn't good for my heart. So I just figured it out. But I do drink coffees, like everyday dose, that have amino acids and stuff in them that help with brain function.
So what are some tips that you can give to parents to help with their self-regulation so we don't yell?
I mean, meditation is such a simple prescription. I did a lot of meditation and breath work for a while, but I could tell you from my heart-mouth coaching, it's resilience training. And it just is so simple as waking up in the morning and taking 5 minutes to do like a 5-box breath. So you do like a count of 5 in. So hold for 5, out for 5, a very slow out. And then hold for another 5 with the breath out, and then repeat it. And do that for about 5 rounds.
I feel more calm already.
Do that for like 5 rounds. I should have done that this morning myself when I was having a bit of an anxiety attack. And then you want to think about something that just makes you feel really warm and cuddly. Like, it was always my dog that I used, because my dog was really there for me after Max passed away. And I wouldn't say it would be my kids, because sometimes your kids aggravate you. So those are triggers. You don't want to think of a trigger. You want to think of something like sitting on the beach or lying in, like, I love lying in bed. And that's another thing for ADHDers. We're like, we just love to lie in bed, just thinking about getting up.
Yeah, and the box breathing and techniques like that are important to teach our kids too, and especially kids with ADHD or problems with self-regulation. There's another one, we used to do this with Autumn when she was younger. We do the box breathing now, but you just put up your hand and you breathe in. You just trace your hand and you breathe in as you go up, out as you go down, and then you just do it for every finger.
Another good thing is to do a little light tapping.
I forget.
And
this
is like almost like a form of EMDR.
Yeah.
But like really slow tapping. And it just helps with your left and right brain communication. These are like really simple things. Another thing would be just to have a gratitude practice. Every morning, I'm grateful for waking up. I'm grateful for having my breath. I'm grateful that I have a roof over whatever, the most simple things to have gratitude for, to remember the good things in your life. It's so powerful to do that. And if kids are taught young to have those little practices, then their day starts off on a much better tone, like from a calmer, like, I'm going to have a great day today because I'm so grateful that Mom made me breakfast. I'm so grateful that I love my sister, or whatever it is, I'm grateful for my dog that shows me unconditional love. And those simple things are like the kinds of things that parents can easily do with their kids. But we get so busy. So like to give you an example, my book isn't launched quite yet. And the reason is because it's very complicated to upload your book to Amazon.
Yep.
So just getting my account on Amazon and getting it validated, that was one part. And now getting the forms filled out and figuring how to do the technological stuff is very stressful. And I'm saying that because I'm like in my own mind, I'm in a rush. Like I got to get this done. I'm tired of talking about the upcoming book. It's just really annoying me.
Right.
So then I get myself in a bit of a tizzy about it. But what's the real rush? The rush is me rushing myself, getting myself anxious, making myself think something's wrong. I mean, I need to tell myself, like, honestly, Stacey,
Chill out.
it's okay. Like, you're the only one who's anxious about this. Nobody else cares. And you'll get it done. And then that was the other thing is like, I got my website done and getting the website launched. So we have so I have to get the Amazon account set up so I could get the link so I could put it on my website. And I can't launch the website. So it's all linked together. So you guys know, like, it's the same with your podcast, all the many things that need to be right in order to get it done.
So tell us about repair. So after we do mess up, yell at our kids, tell us how we repair that.
Repairing is as simple as just as quickly as possible, letting your child know, or your partner or anybody, friends, but mainly your children, letting them know that if you've just screamed at them and went completely bloody murder on them, you need to immediately tell them, I am so sorry. Mommy shouldn't have done that. I love you. I need to learn to be a better communicator, and I'm here to support you, and then you ask them if they want a hug, because sometimes parents will hug their kids when they're really dysregulated, and they may not be ready for that sensory touch. You want to ask them, like, what can I do to support you? Can I hug you? Can I get you something to eat? What can I do to show you that I'm going to be better the next time? And that you're a good child. You are a good person. Doing things wrong is a learning experience. And that we do not learn unless we make mistakes. So for me to get mad at you when you might have made a little mistake is wrong on my part. So I need to own that.
Yeah.
And make sure that they accept it.
Definitely. So raising teens and kids overall is difficult as it is. And then you mix in all the challenges and struggles we have with addiction or being exposed to different substances and everything. So what are some of the things you've learned throughout your training with the parenting and what to look out for? Because I explain to my daughter all the time, I'm like, honey, these drugs, they're a whole different kind. It's way different ball game, and it is so scary.
It's definitely one of my biggest fears as a mom. And now that I'm parenting, we have 3 teenagers now. So yeah, please give us tips and thoughts you have on that.
Well, it's like kids don't realize that it's like one mistake can be fatal.
That's why it's so
And so you
scary.
have to like educate them. You have to like get them in a mood, like maybe like go to maybe make a really nice meal and say, hey, I want to have like a talk with you tonight about some important things that worry me, because I love you and I want you to be aware of all the dangers out in the world, and that trying to like have fun by taking a drug could actually end your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, my son, he had anxiety disorder and panic disorder. So his drug of choice was mostly Xanax. But he would take oxys and things like that, if he couldn't get the Xanax. And benzodiazepines, which is what Xanax is, they're very dangerous because they slow down your heart, they slow down your respiratory system, and you build up such a really strong tolerance to them, and you have to constantly take more. So while they may not be helping as much with the anxiety and the other problems that you have, they're still going to keep slowing down your respiratory system and keep slowing down your heart, which could basically stop your heart. So my son, I believe, when he passed away, we just found out that he was using again. He just admitted it to us really like the day before.
How old was he when he passed?
He was 25.
Okay.
And he lived with us. And, you know, he had a girlfriend. And whenever he was using, he'd go to her house. So, you know,
They're so good at hiding it. That was the one thing I learned when I dated that guy. So good at hiding it.
They're very good at hiding it. They'll say, oh, I was just smoking pot.
Yes.
You know, like, well, that's not good either.
Yeah.
They'll be like, I just smoked some weed. They always use that as the example. But he had there were some things happening. So like my biggest pet peeve with teenagers is that secrets are dangerous. So like if something's happened and they need support or help and they're afraid to go to their parents, meaning they don't have a secure attachment with their parents, and they don't feel safe, that their parent hasn't communicated, like, I don't care what's going on, you come to me, I will help you to work through the problem. Don't totally fix it for them alone, because that's what I did. I was like a bit of a helicopter parent, and I was a perfectionist. And that perfectionism went with the whole ADHD thing. But going back to this, you have to let them know that they could come to you for anything. And I mean anything, and they will not be punished.
Yeah.
Because you want to get ahead of it. You want to be able to have a safe place to talk about it. My son did feel safe enough to come to us and let us know. But when kids are using, when they say they want to get help, oftentimes at that time is when they decide to have like a last hurrah.
One last hurrah.
And they're like, oh, I got to use it all up. It's no different than being on a diet.
Yeah.
When you want to eat all the last cookies. Now, I know that personally.
Yes.
So,
yeah, all three of us are on GLP-1s. Yes.
Right.
It's a real thing.
And I realized that. So like I realized that when I was working in the recovery center, and when I first started going on the GLPs a couple years ago, and I did that. I always did that. You know, that, oh, I got to finish all this bread and the cookies and the gummy bears or whatever the hell I was eating at the time. And I had, the drugs are the same. So sugar's my addiction. I still kind of deal with it a little bit, not as bad. And for them, it could be like same sugar center, cocaine center, you know, in your brain. Methamphetamine, big here. Like there's a lot of methamphetamine use in our city, and I all over the country because it's cheap.
Yeah, right.
All these, like, there's pleasure centers and receptors in our brains that deal with all this stuff. But basically, your kids need to know they can come to you, and that all of these things are laced with fentanyl.
Yes, fentanyl is so scary.
So my son probably got a fentanyl pressed pill.
Okay.
So we didn't know at the time. It was in June 2017. They hadn't figured out the fentanyl crisis yet. All I know is that the police said that people were dropping dead all over the place, so it must have just entered the supply.
So his girlfriend wouldn't have had Narcan back then because it wasn't.
No, and he was home that day. I didn't know anything about Narcan. I carry Narcan in my car now. Like, I have it with me all the time.
I think our kids should have access to Narcan because, they go to parties even if they're not using,
It only works on opioids, Narcan. So, like, it wouldn't work on, I don't think it works on benzodiazepines. I don't think it works on Xanax. But, like oxys and heroin and fentanyl, it works. But, like, you guys could get it for free from all kinds of places. Just look up free Narcan.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of organizations that will give it to you for free. With teenagers, yes, you should always have it. They should know what it does. When you use Narcan, you have an hour. So it gives you an hour. You got to get that person to the hospital.
Yeah, it just gives you
after.
time basically for the ambulance to get there.
It gives you a window, but it's not like something that you just do and then you forget about them. Like, oh, they're okay. No, you got to take them in. You got to have them looked at. But all the kids should know how to deal with an overdose emergency. And a lot of the Narcan now is like nasal Narcan.
Yeah.
It used to be like the injector. Kids aren't going to be comfortable with that. But and also, like, they have to know what to do. Like when you're giving somebody Narcan, you got to turn them on their side, because when they get the Narcan, they're going to vomit and they're going to aspirate. You don't want them to choke on their vomit. So you put them like on the side in the fetal position, kind of, and you want to keep them in that position so that they're not going to choke and asphyxiate, because that's the other thing. And also, like, if somebody's like a very serious addict and not just like a one-time or two-time user, they're going to go through some serious withdrawal at that time. That's the other reason you got to get them into the hospital. They could go through seizures, and alcohol is also a very serious drug.
Yeah.
Really hard to get off of alcohol.
That was an experience when I was dating this guy, we were in Mexico and I had never been there before, and he had been there many times before. He knew exactly where to go to get what he needed, because you can just get stuff at pharmacies there. So we went to a pharmacy. He's like, I want to show you downtown. We went to a pharmacy and he said, I'm like, what are you getting from here? I'm like, so naive. He's like, oh, my back's really hurting on this bed. I'm going to get some ibuprofen. I was like, okay, this is day 2. He goes and gets his ibuprofen and something else for his stomach, and takes whatever. Then it was like the next morning, we go to the beach. We're having the drink service there. I finally get like a little bit buzzed. I don't really even drink that much. Went to the pool. He's like, I'm going to go refill my drink at the bar. Okay, no problem. I go to lay down and I start to fall asleep and I like zone out a little bit. And then I'm woken up by the hotel staff and they're like, excuse me, is your name Tiffany? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, your boyfriend, like he passed out and he hit his head and we need to take him to the hospital now. And I'm like, what? Yeah. And he had a seizure and he several times over. And when I went up to the hotel room, the ambulance woman, she was like, did he take anything? I'm like, I don't know. So I looked through his bag and I'm like, oh, he just took like some ibuprofen. I showed it to her. She's like, I am so sorry. She's like, that's not what this is. It's tramadol, which tramadol is a prescription opioid medication used in adults for management of moderate to severe pain. And, it's often prescribed for pain when the other meds just don't work as well. And I was like, oh, she's like, how many did you take? I'm like, I don't know.
You didn't know he was taking them.
I had no idea. So she's like, yeah, she was saying basically like how her dad was very addicted to them. And she's like, I'm so sorry. And we had to go to the private hospital. And then he, wants to tell his parents about it, but he doesn't tell them the truth. He's like, they're like, oh, you just took some silly Mexican pills. And I'm like, this is real. This is traumatic. And then even after, too, like, didn't really want to accept it and really share with me. But I remember going back to the hotel room and I was like, how many did you take? He's like, oh, a couple. I'm like, well, I have the bottle here and there's 100 count. So I'm going to pour them out and count. So how many did you take? And it was like, oh, maybe 3, 4, whatever. It was a lot.
Really?
A lot.
And I was detoxing at your home when you got back, right?
Yeah. So I was like,
getting him into rehab or something.
Was he trying to do a detox on his own, or was he just taking the medications?
Well, so that's when he was addicted, and then he came back, and then he wasn't going to tell his parents the truth, and I'm like, somebody has to. So I did. And they still didn't really kind of want to accept it. And then they were like, oh my God, this is the stuff. I think his mom knew somebody who had passed from it. And I'm like, yeah, this is real, actually, because I lost a cousin, my cousin Jillian, from this. And it's sad and it's real. And so, yes, then he said, oh, I'm going to go get admitted. But his work would only cover for alcohol overdose. A lot of times treatment doesn't cover for other things. So that's when I figured out it was the pills. I still wasn't sure. He still said it was alcohol. So then it was a cost thing. So yeah, he did it with me at my condo and I had to see that for like 2 days. And then the third day he went back home and then I'm hearing he's drinking some alcohol. I'm like, aren't you like detoxing? Because he got like the pills to like do the detox. I'm like, aren't you detox? But the shaking and it was horrible. The vomiting and
yeah, withdrawal is serious. And like with, depending on which drugs he was taking in addition to those, and it's probably a whole lot more.
And I think like snorting some Adderall too.
Oh, geez. Yeah, you could go through some major seizures. I mean, it's very dangerous to detox off of alcohol and
it was all the above.
Xanax. Like you have to go through a medical detox. It's like my son had to go through that a year and a half before he passed away. He went through a medical detox and we sent him to a place for 30 days. Now, we didn't know anything about recovery stuff at that time. Like we were really stupid. You know, we didn't know.
Well, that was the peak of the opioid epidemic. It was horrible.
Yeah, so we didn't really understand it at that time because the most dangerous time for an addict is after they come out of a rehab. If they happen to and because relapse is a part of recovery, so if they happen to relapse in any small way, their tolerance is much lower now.
They think they can
And that's when
more.
they OD. That's when they tend to OD the most. So that is literally, if people don't know this, they need to know that the most dangerous time for any addict that you love is when they come out of a recovery facility. And they need to be watched. They need a companion of some sort because odds are they're going to relapse and they're going to overdo it.
So
Because they don't know their limits anymore.
Yeah. How old was Max when you found out that he was using drugs?
Max was 15.
Okay.
So we battled it for 10 long years.
So how did you find out? Did he come to you at 15? So no,
it was kind of obvious. So what happened is so a lot of things had happened with Max along the way. Abuses, not by us, but like he wanted to go to military school when he was in middle school. So he went to a place called Missouri Military Academy. And we thought that would be a good place for him because he loved he loved Cub Scouts, he loved Boy Scouts, he loved that kind of stuff. And he seemed to think that that's where he wanted to go. So we allowed it because, you know, we had a hard time with him at home. We didn't know what to do with him. And we thought maybe this could be an answer. But unfortunately, in places like that, there are sexual abusers and bad things that happen. And of course, he didn't tell us this right away when it happened. And so then it just made matters worse. So
they start to withdraw.
Yeah, so that was middle school. Then he comes home and he goes to school here and he gets involved with some friends who we thought were nice kids. And I would bring my son to his friend's house where the mother was home and think that somebody was watching the kids.
Right.
Well, it turns out, and I didn't find this out until after he died. So I'm talking like 10 years later, I found out that she, the mother, was the dealer.
Oh my gosh. You just never know.
And that all those kids are going over there to use a whole bunch of drugs.
Wow.
I don't know what it was, like all kinds of stuff. So Max was acting in a way that appeared not to be right.
Okay.
And at some point, and I'm trying to remember the whole order of things, but there was a point where we had him hospitalized and he was on a 5150 for 72 hours. That's like a 72 hour hold, a medical hold. And
in Georgia, it's called a 1013, if you've ever heard of.
Yeah, every state has different rules.
It's just the amount of time
where it's like involuntarily held.
And I think it was around that time when we were talking to experts. Like we had money, we could afford resources, but the experts weren't that expert at the end of the day because they're the ones who are recommending, what was it called? Indian. They're recommending the places in Utah, the wilderness places. We didn't have Max kidnapped. We didn't send him to wilderness.
Right. Isn't that where like Paris Hilton had her trauma from too?
Yes.
Or is it the same place or?
It was in Utah somewhere, but there's a bunch of places. Like in Utah, their laws are very different. So for example, if you put a kid into a facility here, there's no ability to really lock them up. There's, what was it called? Like a no lockdown rule or something like that? I don't remember. But it was really tough. There weren't a lot of options. So you had to send them out of state. Now in Utah, like they could do whatever, like it was like the Wild West of teenage adolescent treatment out there. And so Max went willingly, but then, it was like, come rescue me. And we realized that place was not good. and they did get in trouble, and they did get shut down. Then they shut down, they open up as another name.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's a horribly disgusting business. And so that did more damage. And then he came back, and, other things happened. There were so many things that happened. And, we tried a lot of things, and it just, because like once you do the damage in their childhood, it's really hard to undo that damage, which is why I got into the parenting side of things. It wasn't what I was like, I didn't want to have this dream of being a parenting expert, but from my experience of screwing up and also having experts give me bad advice.
Yeah.
And having so many things happen that were not right, I learned from those things.
So what would you have done differently now that you have so much more education and knowledge?
I'd get a time machine and go back in time and be a much better parent.
Yeah.
But I can't do that. That's a dream.
Yeah.
It would, I don't know, like there weren't even, I don't know if there were the right kinds of therapists at that time to really treat these problems effectively. At one point, like when Max was like 16 or 17, 16 and a half, he started, like there was a time when he was 15, he was a little suicidal, and I made a deal with him after hours of talking to him and trying to connect, find out what I could do to help him, how could I support you? At the end of it, I was basically making a deal with him, and he realized that I said, well, would a tattoo, do you want to get it? I don't know how we even got there,
Targeting.
but he wanted a tattoo. So I said, okay, will you feel better if I let you get a tattoo? He said, yes. That was after like 5 hours of negotiating with a very good...
anything at this point.
I was willing to bargain and do anything, which is not really the right way to do it, but I didn't know, I was doing anything.
Yeah.
And so what happened is I said, okay, you could get a tattoo. It's going to say tolerance is key. We both agreed that tolerance was a big issue, and we talked a lot about it. Tolerance of others, others of him, me being tolerant, him being tolerant of me. It was like such a powerful conversation about tolerance. And so what happened is he got addicted to tattoos now. And then he was stealing checks from us, and he got caught, and we basically said, you're a minor now. We're going to turn you in as a minor, and you're going to go to juvenile detention, which was actually one of the best places he went to from like 17 to 18. And he went to I don't know what it was, but it was just it was more helpful than any of the other places he went to. And it just was a big wake-up call for him. But he still kept going down the road, because once the damage is done, it's hard to get that out. It's hard to effectively recondition them. And their nervous system, and you add like a bad case, like I'm saying, he had a bad case of ADHD, combined type,
Right.
Meaning he had all the different characteristics, and his executive function was weak. He was super intelligent, super good at his IQ, on verbal IQ was super high, but his other part of his IQ for testing was like getting things done and follow through. We couldn't figure out if it was like, did he not do it because he knew he was going to fail, or could he really not do it? And nobody could ever figure that out. And nowadays, I think it's more related to, ADHD and
Seeking the dopamine, like getting things done last minute. It's such a rush for me. Now, when you mentioned, Stacey, too, that you said if you could go back in time, you would change being and be a better parent because you felt like you were a bad parent. In what ways do you feel like you're a bad parent? Or is this a combination of you also then being hard on yourself?
No, I'm not being hard on myself. I mean, I'm being real here. Like I really screwed. I did a lot of good things too. I wasn't all bad. I loved my kids. I did my best. I was there for them. I was like very supportive. I was around. I was a full-time parent. But what I didn't do is connect as deeply as I could have. Like, I thought that when the principal was calling me almost every day, that I had to deal with that. In retrospect, if I could go back, I would say, you know what? Maybe my son isn't in the right place in your school. And his mental health is way more important than schoolwork
Yeah.
and getting his
Right.
homework done and being able to fulfill all the requirements of our education system. Because if you learn a lot of things, but you don't have good mental health, you're not going to succeed. And I didn't have that forethought at the time. And I would have put everything aside. I would have said, I just would have had to buck up, and whether it be even like homeschooling wasn't really as together back then, but it was there, but I just didn't really know much about it. And I would have had to just do it myself or hire people to help me and take him out of that environment where he was being decimated on a daily basis, criticized, beaten up, told he wasn't good enough, told he was disruptive, a brat. And I said things too that I regret, because I was like frustrated. I didn't know what to do. And if I could go back and change all of that and just, I may not be super parent, but if I could change the ratio of connection to really control being very nothing, just connection, and what can I do to support you? Because why else am I having a child if I can't grow a child that's going to be healthy and do better than I did, and that I leave a legacy of a next generation that is able to cope and be its best self.
Yeah, I think that's super powerful. And that kind of leads up to, when I'm going to close us out here in a little bit, what is the one thing that you hope that parents can take away from this?
That kids, especially younger children, we think they're so smart because, they do absorb things and they seem like they get certain things, but they're super immature. They are not developed. They don't know how to communicate. And if they're misbehaving, it's because they don't know how to communicate what's going on with them at the moment. And they are just trying to survive in the moment, and they don't want to be in trouble. Nobody wants to be in trouble. And if they're used to being in trouble all the time, then they're going to lie about it because they don't want to be in trouble. They're going to have a tantrum because they're just so confused. They're going to have childhood anxiety. And if they have the ADHD, and they have, like my daughter also has a form of OCD, which goes with the ADHD, because you can have other little side things to deal with. And she was a checker, so she was always paranoid that somebody was out to get her. It was that kind of OCD. And that was actually diagnosed. The kids both got diagnosed with doctors. And we got to be able to help them through these things. That is what I would do. I would be like, I matter. My mental health matters too. I would get a coach. I would get support. I would ask anybody out there that I know to help support me. I didn't really have a lot of support from my family, though. So that was part of the problem. I had very little familial support because I was dealing with people who were very dysfunctional.
Yeah, we see that all too common. That was kind of me too. So also, if you feel comfortable, if you would want to leave like a closing message that we can honor and say something to Max.
Max is with me all the time. He's in my heart. He's in my soul. I feel him with me, always watching over all of us. And I see his bright smile. I've got pictures of him all around the house. I always want to remember him. But he was a really kind, gentle soul. And he wanted to help people too. But he didn't always help himself. So that's the other thing is help others, but help yourself first.
That's really important, especially for all of us parents that are trying to take on and do so much. It's a lot.
One more thing I wanted to add, because I meant to tell you earlier, you know that with ADHD, that binge eating and boredom eating is a big part of that too. Did you know that?
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's why a lot of people with ADHD suffer with
Yep.
disorderly eating.
I mean, it's really
And shopping.
like anything that could be impulse control. And that's why like it presents so differently between different people. Like
Mhm.
when we were talking about the rage, Tiffany, the person in my family who has the tantrums and rage issues, that's the ADHD. And then
Oh.
we had no
But it's not,
idea.
you don't commonly see that in girls.
No. So you just it presents differently than some people binge eating, some people quiet and
Mhm.
quietly anxious
And in
and
their mind, yeah, that's me. Mhm.
mhm.
Yeah, it's like a hair trigger reaction when your nervous system can't handle anything. That's
Right.
rage. That's the rage.
Wow. That's powerful. So I know that your book, by the time we get this podcast out there, it's probably going to be out there. So
It
is
should
it
be.
going to be
It's my
available
only
on?
goal.
Yes. Is this going to be available where? Tell us where people can find you.
So it will be on Amazon Books.
Mhm.
And my website will be directed to Stacey Silberman, Silberman. I should spell my whole name, but also Stop Screaming at Your Kids is also will lead to my website. So the website and the book will be up
Mhm.
on July 9th at the
Amazing.
latest, because that's when I have my appointment to get my website launched.
Awesome.
So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us. This has
Stacey.
been amazing. So make sure to keep listening and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media at A Holistic Dose on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube for more fun. And thanks for hanging out with us. We'll be back next week with more unfiltered friend talk right here on A Holistic Dose.
We'll see you next time.